It was just another shift at the hospital. My name's Eliza Bennett, a 40-year-old ER nurse who's seen it all. I like my job, even though it's tough sometimes. The hospital's short on specialists, so I often pull double duty, working in the ER and wherever else I'm needed. Tonight, I was in the ER, same as always. My husband, Michael? Well, he's been busy building his political career, working as an assistant to the mayor. We don't talk much about my work. He's not too interested. We've been living our separate lives under the same roof, each absorbed in our own worlds. We never had kids. I wanted them for a long time, but it just didn't happen. Eventually, Michael told me he was fine without children. He said he liked the quiet, so it's just been the two of us, living in a kind of silent agreement. The ER was buzzing with the usual chaos, nurses and doctors rushing around, the constant beeping of machines. I was checking on a patient when I heard the ambulance siren. It was a call from a residential area, something about a sick baby. I've always had a soft spot for kids, so I volunteered to go. My colleague, John, was driving the ambulance. He's a good guy, always has a joker ready to lighten the mood. We've worked together for years. Ready for another adventure, Elisa? John asked as we hopped into the ambulance. Always, I replied with a half smile. We chatted about trivial things on the way, the weather, a new restaurant in town. It was a way to keep the tension at bay, to stay calm before facing whatever awaited us. The address led us to a fancy neighborhood, the kind where each house looked like it could be on a postcard. John whistled as we pulled up to a large, well-lit house. Someone's doing well for themselves, he commented. I just nodded, grabbing my medical bag. We were met at the door by a young woman, probably in her early 20s. She was holding a baby, and I could see the worry etched on her face. Please, help my baby. He's got a fever, and he won't stop crying, she pleaded, her voice cracking with emotion. Let's take a look, I said, trying to sound reassuring. Her mother, an older woman with kind eyes, stood by her side. I could see where the young woman got her looks. They led us into a spacious living room where I began examining the baby. I didn't know it then, but that night was going to change everything. My ordinary life was about to get a whole lot more complicated. As I examined the baby, I could tell something was wrong. He was burning up with fever and seemed to be having spasms. I needed to act fast. John, we need to cool him down now, I said urgently. John nodded, quickly understanding the situation. Got it, Eliza. I'll get some ice packs and a cool cloth. While John fetched the supplies, I turned to the young woman. I'm Eliza. What's your baby's name? She was on the verge of tears. His name is Liam. He was fine this afternoon, and then suddenly, it's okay, I said gently. We're going to take care of Liam. John came back with the ice packs and a cloth. We worked together, trying to bring down Liam's fever. The young woman, who I learned was named Sophia, and her mother watched us, anxiety written all over their faces. Is he going to be okay? Sophia's mother asked. She was trying to stay strong, but I could hear the worry in her voice. We're doing everything we can, I assured her. After a few tense minutes, Liam's fever started to come down. He stopped convulsing and began to calm. Relief washed over Sophia's face. Thank you, she whispered. We should still get him to a hospital to be checked over, I suggested. Better safe than sorry. Sophia nodded. Of course, whatever he needs. As we prepared to move Liam, the front door opened. I didn't pay it much attention until I heard a familiar voice. What's going on here? Sophia, are you okay? I froze. That voice. I'd know it anywhere. It was Michael, my husband. I turned slowly, and there he was, standing in the doorway. Our eyes met, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. Eliza, what are you doing here? Michael's voice was a mix of surprise and something else. Fear, maybe. I could ask you the same question. I said, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. Sophia looked from Michael to me and back again. You two know each other? Michael opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked like a deer caught in headlights. Eliza is my wife, he finally managed to say. I confirmed, yes, I am his wife. The room went silent. Sophia's eyes widened and her mother let out a gasp. I could feel John's eyes on me, full of questions. Your wife? Sophia's voice was barely a whisper. She looked at Michael, hurt and confusion written all over her face. Michael didn't answer. He just stood there, looking like he wished the ground would swallow him up. In that moment, I realized my ordinary life was over. Everything had changed, and there was no going back. The room was thick with tension. I couldn't believe Michael was here, in this house, with Sophia and her baby. I felt like I was in some kind of bad dream. Sophia was the first to break the silence. Michael, why is she calling you her husband? Michael finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Sophia, I can explain. Explain? Sophia's voice rose. Explain why my baby's nurse is claiming to be your wife. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, waiting for my response. I took a deep breath. Because I am his wife. We've been married for 10 years. Sophia's face crumpled. But you told me you were divorced. Michael ran a hand through his hair, looking desperate. I know, and I'm sorry. I was going to tell you, You just what? Sophia's mother cut in, her voice sharp. Lied to my daughter, to us. John, who had been silent until now, spoke up. Maybe we should give you some space to talk this out. I nodded, grateful for his intervention. Yes, we should go. Liam's stable, but he still needs to be seen at the hospital. As John and I started to move Liam's carrier, the front door opened again. Another surprise. This time, an older man walked in. I recognized him immediately. Mayor Thomas Harrington, Michael's boss. What's all this commotion? The mayor asked, looking around the room. Sophia rushed to him. Dad, this is complicated. The mayor's eyes landed on Michael. Michael, what's going on? Before Michael could respond, Sophia blurted out, Michael's married, Dad, and he lied to me about it. The mayor's expression turned from confusion to anger. Married? Is this true, Michael? Michael nodded, unable to meet the mayor's gaze. Yes, sir, it's true. I could see the wheels turning in the mayor's head. And you're his wife? He asked, looking at me. Yes, I am, I confirmed. The mayor shook his head. I can't believe this. Michael, you've been working for me for over a year, and I had no idea. Michael tried to say something, but the mayor held up a hand to stop him. Save it. I need some time to process this. Sophia was crying now, her mother comforting her. The mayor looked at his daughter and granddaughter with a mixture of sadness and anger. I felt like I was watching everything from a distance. This was my life falling apart, but it felt like a scene from a TV show. As John and I finally left the house with Liam, I couldn't help but glance back. Michael was standing there looking lost. Part of me felt sorry for him, but another part of me was angry. So very angry. I had no idea what was going to happen next. All I knew was that my ordinary life was gone, replaced by something much messier and more complicated. After dropping Liam off at the hospital and making sure he was in good hands, I couldn't stop thinking about everything that had happened. I needed answers. I needed to talk to Michael. I drove home, my mind racing. When I got there, Michael's car was in the driveway. I took a deep breath and went inside. Michael was sitting at the kitchen table, looking like he hadn't moved since he got home. He looked up when I came in, his expression a mix of guilt and fear. Eliza, He started, but trailed off. I sat down across from him. I want to know everything, Michael. How long has this been going on? Why did you lie to her? To me? Michael took a deep breath. It started a year ago, at a work event. I met Sophia and we hit it off. I know I should have told her the truth, but I saw an opportunity. Opportunity? I couldn't hide the hurt in my voice. With her being the mayor's daughter, I thought... He paused, struggling to find the words. I thought it could help my career. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. So, our marriage, our life together, it meant nothing to you? It's not like that, Eliza. I do care about you, but I felt stuck. I thought I needed more. And a baby. Did you plan that too? My voice was rising now, anger mixing with the hurt. No, that was an accident. But when Sophia told me, I thought maybe it could all work out. I could have this new life. A new life? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. And what about our life? What about me? Michael looked down, unable to meet my eyes. I don't know. I thought maybe we could get a divorce, and it would be better for both of us. So, you were just going to leave me? After 10 years? I was going to talk to you about it. I just needed to figure things out first. I shook my head, feeling a mix of sadness and disbelief. You were going to leave me and marry her, weren't you? Michael didn't answer, but he didn't need to. I knew the truth. I can't believe this, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I can't believe you would do this to me. I'm sorry, Eliza. I never meant to hurt you. Sorry doesn't fix this, Michael. You've lied to me, to Sophia, to everyone, and now everything's falling apart. Michael looked like he wanted to say more, but I stood up. I need some time to think, to figure out what I'm going to do. As I walked away, I could feel Michael's eyes on me, but I didn't look back. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions, but one thing was clear. Everything had changed, and there was no going back. The next few days were a blur. I went to work, but my mind was elsewhere. Michael tried to talk to me, but I couldn't deal with it. Not yet. Then, one evening, I found myself at Sophia's doorstep. I needed to talk to her, to understand her side of the story. I rang the bell, and after a moment, she opened the door. Eliza? Sophia looked surprised to see me. I think we need to talk, I said. She hesitated, but then nodded, stepping aside to let me in. We sat down in her living room, an awkward silence hanging in the air. Why are you here? Sophia finally asked. I want to understand. What did Michael tell you about us? Sophia took a deep breath. He said he was divorced, that he'd been single for a while. I had no idea about you until you showed up that night. I nodded, feeling a pang of sadness. And the baby? Liam? She looked down, tears welling in her eyes. He was a surprise. Michael said we could be a family, that he wanted to be there for us. I believed him. I could hear the pain in her voice, and despite everything, I felt sorry for her. I'm sorry, Sophia. I'm sorry he lied to both of us. She wiped her eyes. I'm sorry too. I never wanted to be part of something like this. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the situation pressing down on us. Did you love him? I asked, not sure if I wanted to know the answer. Sophia looked up, her expression sad. I thought I did. But now, I don't know what to believe. He lied about everything. I nodded, understanding all too well. Yeah, I get that. We talked for a while longer, sharing our stories, our confusion, our pain. It was strange, talking like this with the other woman, but it was also comforting in a way. When I left, I felt a little lighter, like I'd let go of some of the anger and hurt. It wasn't gone, not by a long shot, but it was a start. As I drove home, I thought about Michael, about our marriage, about everything that had happened. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew I couldn't stay in limbo forever. I needed to make a decision, for my sake and for my future. The weeks following the revelation of Michael's betrayal felt like a stormy sea, each day tossing me between waves of anger, disbelief, and an unexpected sense of liberation. As I braced myself for the legal battles ahead, the reality of the situation became crystal clear. It was me and Mayor Harrington versus Michael. The day of the trial dawned like any other, but with a weight that felt like a heavy cloud hanging over me. Walking into the courtroom, I was a mix of nerves and determination. Mayor Harrington gave me a nod of solidarity as we took our seats. The courtroom buzzed with the quiet chatter of spectators and the shuffling of papers. When Michael walked in, escorted by his lawyer, my heart raced. He avoided eye contact, but I could feel the tension between us. The trial began with the mayor's case. His lawyer presented evidence of Michael's deception, how he had lied about being divorced and manipulated Sophia, the mayor's daughter. Photographs, texts, and emails painted a clear picture of Michael's duplicity. Mayor Harrington himself took the stand, his disappointment and anger toward Michael evident in his testimony. Sophia also testified, her voice trembling as she recounted the lies Michael had fed her. Then, it was my turn. My lawyer laid out the case against Michael, highlighting his infidelity and deceit. I took the stand, my hands shaking slightly. The lawyer asked me to recount how I discovered Michael's affair and the events that followed. As a nurse, I am trained to stay calm in emergencies, I began, my voice steady. But nothing could have prepared me for the shock of finding my husband with another woman and a child he had kept hidden from me. The courtroom was silent, hanging on my every word. I spoke about our marriage, the struggles, and how Michael's ambition had slowly overshadowed our relationship. When it was Michael's turn, his defense seemed weak. His lawyer tried to downplay the situation, suggesting misunderstandings and miscommunications. But the evidence was overwhelming. Michael himself stumbled through his testimony, his excuses sounding hollow and insincere. As the trial proceeded, I felt a growing sense of empowerment. For years, I had lived in the shadow of Michael's ambitions, but here, in this courtroom, I was reclaiming my life. Finally, the judge delivered the verdict. Michael was found guilty of fraud and deceit in both cases. There was a murmur in the courtroom, a mix of satisfaction and disbelief. As we exited the courtroom, reporters swarmed around, but I declined to comment. This victory was not about public attention. It was personal, a step towards healing and moving on. Driving home, the weight of the past weeks began to lift. I knew there would be challenges ahead, but for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of hope. The trial had not just been about legal justice, it was a journey to self-discovery and reclaiming the narrative of my own life. That evening, as I sat quietly at home, I realized the trial was more than a closure. It was the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where I was not just a spectator in my life, but the author of my own story. The trial was over, but its ripples were still felt in every corner of my life. The legal victory was clear, but the emotional landscape was more complicated. I had won, but at what cost? The weeks following the trial were a blur. I threw myself into work, finding solace in the routine of my shifts at the hospital. It was during one of these shifts that I ran into Sophia, the mayor's daughter, in the hospital corridor. "Hey," she said quietly, her eyes reflecting a shared understanding of pain and betrayal. "Hi, Sophia," I replied. "How are you holding up?" "It's been tough," she admitted, cradling her baby in her arms. "But I'm managing. And you?" "Day by day," I said, offering a small smile. "Taking it day by day." We exchanged a few more words before parting ways, a silent acknowledgement of the strange bond that now linked us. Back at home, the loneliness of the empty house sometimes felt overwhelming. I had grown used to Michael's absence, but the finality of the divorce brought a new kind of solitude. It was during these quiet moments that I would often find myself reflecting on the past, on the choices I had made, and the ones that had been made for me. One evening, as I was sorting through old papers, I came across an envelope addressed to me. It was from Michael. My first instinct was to throw it away, but curiosity got the better of me. As I read his letter, his words of apology and explanation felt empty. He talked about his mistakes, his regrets, and his desire to make things right. But it was too little, too late. I crumpled the letter and tossed it into the trash, feeling a surge of anger, and then, surprisingly, a sense of release. Michael was part of my past, but he would not define my future. A few days later, I received a call from Mayor Harrington. He wanted to meet for coffee, to thank me personally for my courage during the trial. Sitting across from him in the small cafe, I felt a sense of respect for the man who had stood by his daughter and supported me through the legal ordeal. "Thank you for meeting me, Eliza," he said, his voice sincere. "Your strength during the trial was admirable." "I did what I had to do," I replied, stirring my coffee, "for myself and for Sophia. I want you to know that the City Council is here to support you," he continued. "If there's anything you need, don't hesitate to reach out." I nodded, appreciative of his offer, but determined to stand on my own 2 feet. As I walked back home, I realized that the aftermath of the trial was not just about picking up the pieces, it was about building something new. My marriage to Michael had ended, but my life was still very much in progress. In the following weeks, I made a conscious decision to focus on myself. I reconnected with old friends, took up new hobbies, and even began considering furthering my education in nursing. The journey was not easy. There were days of doubt and moments of loneliness. But there was also a newfound sense of freedom and possibility. I was no longer tied to Mikhail's ambitions or his betrayals. I was my own person, with my own path to forge. As I look back on that tumultuous time, I realize that the aftermath was not just about recovering from a betrayal. It was about rediscovering who I was and what I wanted out of life. It was about learning to stand alone, not as a victim, but as a survivor, ready to face whatever the future might hold.
My name is Emma. I'm 30 years old, and I work as a financial advisor. That's where I met David, my now ex-husband. I remember that day like it was yesterday. He walked into my office with a stack of papers and a troubled look on his face. "Emma, right?" he said, offering a handshake. "I'm David Caldwell. I heard you're the best in sorting out financial messes." "That's what they say," I replied, smiling. "Let's see what we can do about yours." David was tall, with short brown hair and eyes that seemed to smile even when he didn't. As I sifted through his documents, we started talking. It wasn't just about numbers and taxes. We talked about our favorite movies, music, and even debated over the best pizza in town. He had this easy way about him that made hours feel like minutes. "You know, I never thought sorting my finances would be this enjoyable," David admitted as we wrapped up. "Guess I have a magic touch," I joked. David laughed. "Would you like to grab a coffee sometime?" My treat, for making this not as painful as I expected. That coffee turned into dinner, and dinners turned into weekend getaways. We were inseparable. After 6 months, David proposed, and without a moment's hesitation, I said yes. It was a whirlwind romance, but it felt right. Our wedding was simple yet beautiful. Standing there, exchanging vows, I thought I had found my forever. David's mom, Barbara, was there too. She was a stern-looking woman, but seemed happy for us. "You better give me grandkids soon," she whispered to me with a half-smile. Life as a married couple was blissful at first. David worked in real estate, and I continued at my firm. We shared dinners, movie nights, and long walks. We were a team, or so I thought. However, things began to change when the topic of children came up more frequently. It started with occasional remarks from Barbara, but soon became her constant demand. She would call and ask if I was pregnant yet, and during visits she'd say, "A grandchild would make this family complete." David always laughed it off. "Mom, give us some time," he'd say, but the pressure was building. At first, I tried to be understanding. After all, She was just an excited grandmother-to-be. But her persistence started to weigh on me. It was like our marriage wasn't enough without a child. "David, your mom needs to back off a bit," I said to him one evening. "I feel like she's more in our marriage than we are." David looked uncomfortable. "She's just excited, Emma. Let's not make a big deal out of it." As time went on, Barbara's influence in our life became more and more evident. It wasn't just about her constant nagging for grandchildren. She had opinions about everything, from how we should manage our finances to what we should eat. One Saturday morning, David and I were enjoying breakfast when his phone rang. It was Barbara. David put it on speaker, as he usually did. "David, dear, are you both eating healthy? Remember, a healthy diet is important for conceiving," she said in her usual authoritative tone. David chuckled. "Yes, Mom, we're eating healthy. Don't worry." I forced a smile, but inside I was screaming. It felt like she was monitoring our every move. Things got more intense when Barbara started visiting us more frequently. One evening, she came over unannounced, carrying a stack of parenting books. "Emma, you should start reading these. It's never too early to prepare," she said, dumping the books on the coffee table. I glanced at David, hoping he would say something, but he just shrugged. "Thanks, Barbara. We'll look into them," I said, trying to sound grateful. Her visits became a regular occurrence. It was like she was keeping tabs on us, making sure we were doing everything right to have a child. And every time she brought up the topic, David would just nod and agree with her. One night, after another of Barbara's visits, I couldn't hold it in anymore. "David, we need to talk," I said, frustration evident in my voice. "What's up?" he asked, not looking up from the TV. "It's your mom. She's suffocating us with this baby talk. We barely have time to be a couple without her interference," I said. David finally looked at me. "She's just excited, Emma. She means well." "Excited or obsessed?" I countered. "It feels like she's the third person in our marriage." David sighed. "She's my mom. What do you want me to do? Tell her to stop caring?" "It's not about caring, David. It's about respecting our space, our decisions. Can't you see that?" David didn't respond. He just turned back to the TV, and that was the end of our conversation. But it wasn't the end of the issue. If anything, it only got worse. Barbara's visits became more frequent and her comments more intrusive. "You two should go on a vacation. Just relax. It'll help with conception," she suggested one day. "Maybe Emma should quit her job, reduce the stress," she said on another occasion. It felt like she was dictating our life, and David was letting her. I started feeling like a stranger in my own marriage. The love and understanding that had once bonded David and me seemed to be slipping away, lost in the shadow of Barbara's overbearing presence. The constant pressure about having a baby started to take its toll on both of us. David and I were arguing more often, and the romance that once filled our home seemed to have evaporated. Still, amidst all this, I held on to the hope that things would get better, that we'd find our way back to each other. But then came the day that changed everything. David came home late one evening, looking more downcast than usual. I was in the kitchen, trying to fix us a quick dinner. "David, is everything okay?" I asked, concerned. He slumped into a chair at the kitchen table, burying his face in his hands. "We need to talk, Emma." That tone in his voice sent a chill down my spine. I sat across from him, my heart pounding. "It's about us. Trying to have a baby," he started, not meeting my eyes. "What about it?" I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. "We went to the doctor, remember? For those tests?" he said, finally looking up at me. I nodded. A few weeks ago, we had gone for a fertility checkup, hoping it would put Barbara's nagging to rest. David took a deep breath. "The results came in today. It's not you, Emma. It's me." I felt a mix of emotions: relief, sadness, and confusion. "What do you mean?" "The doctor said I have a low sperm count. It's unlikely that I can father a child," he said, his voice breaking. I reached for his hand, trying to offer some comfort. "David, it's okay. We can figure this out together. Maybe there's treatment or other options." He pulled his hand away, shaking his head. "No, you don't understand. I won't go through any treatment. It's just not something I can do." I was stunned. But why? If there's a chance. It's my decision, Emma. I just can't, he said firmly. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The man I loved, who always seemed so strong and confident, was giving up without even trying. David, please, don't let this come between us. We can work through it, I pleaded. He stood up, avoiding my gaze. I need some time alone to think about all this. And just like that, he walked out of the kitchen, leaving me sitting there, trying to process it all. I couldn't understand why he wouldn't even consider treatment. Was his pride more important than our chance to have a family? The next few days were like walking on eggshells. David barely spoke to me, and when he did, it was short and cold. I felt a growing distance between us, a crack in the foundation of our marriage that seemed to be widening with each passing day. Then came the day that turned the crack into a gaping hole. David had been out late again. I was in bed, pretending to be asleep when he came in. He thought I was asleep and started talking to someone on the phone. Yes, Mom, I got the results. It's not good. No, I don't want treatment. I know, but I can't. Yes, I'll figure something out. Hearing him talk to his mom about something so personal, something he barely discussed with me, felt like a betrayal. It was clear that Barbara's shadow loomed larger over our marriage than I had ever realized. I lay there in the dark, tears streaming down my face, feeling utterly alone. Our marriage was crumbling, and I didn't know how to save it. Life at home had become unbearable. David and I were like strangers, living under the same roof. The love and warmth that once defined our relationship seemed like a distant memory. But just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, life threw me a curveball. I had been feeling under the weather for a few days. At first, I thought it was just stress, but then I missed my period. A part of me was scared to even entertain the thought, but I knew I had to find out. So, one morning, I bought a pregnancy test. Sitting in the bathroom, waiting for the result felt like the longest few minutes of my life. And then, there it was. A positive result. I was pregnant. For a moment, I was in disbelief. After all the talk about David's infertility, this felt like a miracle. A ray of hope in the midst of our crumbling marriage. But how would David react? I decided to tell him that evening. He came home late, as usual, and barely acknowledged me. I took a deep breath and approached him. David, we need to talk, I said, my voice trembling. He looked up, his expression weary. What is it now, Emma? I'm pregnant, I blurted out. For a moment, there was silence. Then he laughed, a bitter, cynical laugh. Pregnant? How? According to the doctors, I can't. I don't know, but the test is positive. We're going to have a baby, I said, tears welling up in my eyes. He stood up abruptly, anger flashing in his eyes. This is some kind of joke, right? You're trying to trap me? I was shocked. Trap you? David, I'm telling you we're going to have a baby. Our baby. He paced the room, running his hands through his hair. No, this can't be. You must have cheated. That's it, isn't it? You cheated on me. I felt like I had been slapped. Cheated? How can you even say that? I've been nothing but faithful to you. He wasn't listening. He was too consumed by his own rage and disbelief. Get out. I want you out of this house, he yelled. David, please, let's talk about this. We can go to the doctor, get a confirmation, I pleaded. But it was like talking to a wall. He stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. That night, I slept in the guest room, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. The next day, David was gone before I woke up. His mother, Barbara, showed up instead. The look on her face was a mix of anger and disgust. You should be ashamed of yourself, Emma, trapping my son with another man's child, she spat. I didn't cheat on David. This child is his. I defended myself. She laughed, a cold, mocking laugh. Do you take me for a fool? My son can't have children. You're just a gold digger, trying to secure your future. I was stunned by her cruelty. This is David's child. I've never been with anyone else. She moved closer, her voice venomous. You have 1 week to pack your things and leave. And don't even think about asking for alimony or child support. You won't get a dime from us. The ultimatum from Barbara was the last straw. I knew I couldn't continue living in a house filled with resentment and accusations. It was time to take control of my life, for my sake and for the baby's. First things first, I filed for divorce. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was necessary. David and his mother tried to make it difficult. They wanted a piece of everything I had, claiming it was their right. But I had a strong case. Everything I owned, all my savings and property, were mine long before David entered my life. Their attempts to grab what wasn't theirs failed miserably. As for alimony, I didn't ask for a penny. I wanted no financial ties to David. No reason for him or his mother to interfere in my life again. I was determined to start anew, free from their toxicity. I found a modest apartment, not too fancy, but cozy enough to be a fresh start. Packing up my things from the house was bittersweet. Every photo, every piece of furniture had a memory attached to it, but I was ready to leave them behind. The day I moved out, David was conspicuously absent. Maybe he couldn't face me, or perhaps he just didn't care. Either way, it didn't matter. I left the keys on the counter and closed that chapter of my life. The first few nights in my new apartment were the hardest. The silence was overwhelming, and the reality of my situation often brought me to tears. But I found solace in the little life growing inside me. Talking to my unborn child became a nightly ritual, filling the emptiness with hope and love. Gradually, life in my new apartment started to feel less like a refuge and more like a home. I found comfort in my routine, and the bond with my unborn child grew stronger each day. One afternoon, as I was sorting through some old things, I found a photo of David and me from happier times. A pang of sadness hit me, but it was quickly replaced by a sense of relief. That chapter of my life was over. Then my phone rang. It was David. "Emma, I've received the divorce papers," he said, his voice emotionless. "I'm glad they reached you. Please take care of the formalities," I responded calmly. There was a pause before he added, "I won't bother you about the baby. You won't hear from me again." It was a cold goodbye, but it was closure. As I hung up, I realized that in my solitude, I had found an inner strength I never knew I had. I was ready to face the future, not as David's estranged wife, but as a strong, independent woman and a loving mother. It was a quiet evening, and I was sitting on the couch, browsing through a magazine while Jacob, my 4-year-old son, played with his toys on the floor. The peace was interrupted by a sudden knock on the door. Puzzled, I went to answer it, wondering who it could be at this hour. Standing there was a woman I barely recognized, but her eyes held a familiar sorrow. "Hi, Emma. It's been a long time," she said hesitantly. It took me a moment, but then I recognized her as Linda, a friend I had known through my ex-husband. "Linda, yes, it has been. What brings you here?" She shifted uncomfortably, looking past me at Jacob, who was now peeking around my legs. "I thought you should know. About David." David. Just hearing his name after all these years sent a chill down my spine. "What about him?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Linda sighed. "He's not doing well, Emma. After you left, things went downhill for him. He became an alcoholic. He remarried a few years ago and had a child, but the boy was born with disabilities. David couldn't handle it. He left them, divorced his wife, and now he's refusing to pay child support. He's in legal trouble." The news hit me hard, but not in the way Linda might have expected. I felt a deep sadness, not for David, but for his child and the woman he had left behind. "That's terrible," I said softly. Linda nodded. "I thought you should know. Given your past with him." I appreciated her concern, but knew I had to set boundaries. "Thank you for telling me, Linda, but that part of my life is over. David made his choices, and they have nothing to do with me or my son." Linda looked at Jacob, then back at me. "I understand, Emma. I just thought—" I smiled, albeit a little sadly. "I appreciate it, Linda, but my focus is on Jacob and our life now. What David does or doesn't do isn't my concern anymore." She nodded, seemingly understanding. "I hope you and Jacob are happy, Emma. You both deserve it." "Thank you, we are." I glanced at Jacob, who was now fully engrossed in his toys again. "And I intend to keep it that way." After Linda left, I closed the door and leaned against it for a moment, taking deep breaths. The past had a way of sneaking up on you, but I was determined not to let it overshadow the life I had built for myself and my son. The park was vibrant that day, with laughter and the sounds of children playing. I was there with Jacob, my heart swelling with pride as I watched him run around. Then, a familiar, unwelcome voice sliced through the air. "Emma, is that you?" I turned, my heart sinking. Barbara, my former mother-in-law, was approaching, her eyes fixed on Jacob. "Barbara?" I said coolly. "What are you doing here?" Ignoring my tone, her gaze was locked on Jacob. "He's grown so much. He's your son, right?" "Yes, this is Jacob," I answered, moving subtly to stand between her and my son. Barbara's eyes sparkled with a disturbing kind of eagerness. "I was hoping to see him. After all, he's my grandson." I felt a wave of anger. "And why would you want to see him?" "Well, you know, my other grandson." She trailed off, her face twisting. "He's not... Well, he's sick. It's just not the same. I want to be part of a healthy grandchild's life." Her words struck me like a slap. The contempt in her voice for her own grandchild was appalling. "Barbara," I said, my voice steely, "you have no right to be part of Jacob's life. Not after everything that happened." "But Emma, that was all David's doing," she protested. I shook my head. "You supported him. You turned against me when I was carrying your grandchild. And now you speak with such disgust about your other grandson just because he's sick. That's unforgivable." Barbara's face reddened. "You can't keep me away from my grandson." "I can, and I will," I declared firmly. "Jacob doesn't need someone in his life who values people based on their health. He will not be part of your twisted view of family." She looked like she was about to argue, but I cut her off. "This conversation is over. Stay away from us, Barbara. Your presence is neither wanted nor welcomed." I took Jacob's hand and walked away, leaving Barbara standing alone, her face a mix of anger and disbelief. As we walked, Jacob looked up at me, his innocent eyes filled with questions. "Mommy, who was that lady?" "That was someone we used to know, sweetheart," I replied gently, "but she's not part of our lives anymore." Sitting on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky with warm colors, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. Jacob was inside, his laughter echoing as he played. Life had settled into a calm rhythm, the storms of the past now distant memories. "Mom, look what I made." Jacob's voice pulled me back from my thoughts. He came running out, holding a drawing in his hands. It was a picture of the two of us, smiling under a big, bright sun. "It's beautiful, Jacob," I said, pulling him into a hug. "You're quite the artist." He beamed with pride. "I want to put it on the fridge." "Let's do that," I smiled, following him inside. As we walked, I thought about how far we'd come. There was a time when the weight of the past felt crushing, but now it seemed like a distant echo. Later that evening, after Jacob was asleep, I sat down with a cup of tea, reflecting on everything. The phone rang, disrupting the quiet. I hesitated but decided to answer it. "Hello?" It was my sister Anna. "Hey, Emma, I just wanted to check in. How are you and Jacob doing?" "We're doing well, Anna. Jacob's growing up so fast," I replied, a smile in my voice. "I heard about your run-in with Barbara." "Are you okay?" she asked, concern lacing her words. I sighed. "Yeah, it was unexpected, but I'm okay. It's just a reminder of the past." "I know it's tough, but you've come so far, Emma. You're strong, and you've built a wonderful life for you and Jacob," she said encouragingly. Her words warmed my heart. "Thanks, Anna. It means a lot." We talked for a while longer, about small things, everyday life. It was comforting, this connection with my sister, a reminder of the support system I had. After hanging up, I went to the living room where Jacob's drawing was displayed on the fridge. Looking at it, I realized how much we had both grown. The pain and anger of the past had faded, leaving room for healing and new beginnings. I walked to Jacob's room, watching him sleep peacefully. Leaning down, I kissed his forehead gently. "Good night, my little artist," I whispered. Back on the porch, I gazed at the stars emerging in the night sky. The echoes of the past were fading, their hold on me loosening. In their place was hope, a quiet strength, and the unconditional love between a mother and her son.